Much for more on the economic impact of the tensions in Thailand. I spoke to Murray Hiebert. He's the senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Southeast Asia.
So yeah, that's Thailand. The two main political parties are in a battle, existential battle for the future of Thailand, and they're both intractable, very stuck on their positions, and so we've had a gridlock, political gridlock, which probably was what caused the and then some ensuing violence in recent days that prompted the military to act at this point.
You're referring to the martial law, and I learned a new term, by the way, over the past couple of weeks called half-coup, which I read about in one of the papers. What does that mean? Why do they call it a half-coup?
Well, they called it a half-coup when 2 days ago the military declared martial law. Since then, the military today has declared actually that it was staging a coup. By the half-coup, by the martial law, they declared certain things off limits, but they ultimately let the government stay in power. Now they've taken out the government. They've arrested, or not arrested, but we don't know if they've arrested. They've detained the top political leaders who, in fact, were in a meeting with the top military commanders as they were preparing to stage the coup. The military said they weren't able to come to a compromise, and so they were going to take them into detention.
We've recently learned that the Thai economy shrank a little over 2% in the past quarter, and we've seen this cycle in the past where the economy shrinks with a geopolitical event and then reverts back to its normal growth cycle. How big of an impact do you think this is likely to have long term?
Well, the shrinking of the GDP that you referred to was as a result of the political impasse that we talked about. Thailand is very important to the global economy. We saw that when they had floods a couple of years ago, that the global supply chain for auto parts, for hard disk drives, goes through Thailand, and the manufacturers of cars and computers ran into a lot of trouble getting supplies. Thailand's also a major rice exporter. So Thailand does have a huge impact when it is sort of out of circulation.
Yeah. I mean, it's also a big part of the global supply chain, right? There are a lot of factories making parts and widgets for Japan, China, and other countries around the world. Is this going to, it hasn't in the past so much, but will this change the minds of foreign direct investors?
Well, that's the big question. We had Honda announce just before the coup today that they were going to reduce production of autos in Thailand cut it by a third. You know, we don't know. You can certainly tell, talking to Japanese American investors, that they are getting a bit anxious about what's going on there. Japanese tell you, frankly, they are looking for alternatives. Car makers, Thailand is the Detroit of the East. Automakers are looking to places like Indonesia now as an alternative. I think people are getting a little nervous after 10 years of cyclical governments, not coups, but protests that really shut down the city, burnt down shopping malls, shut down intersections, that they don't know how long this is going to last, and they don't see, even with the coup, an easy end out of this. There's got to be at least enough compromise between the two main factions to have some kind of elections to bring a government back, and at this point we don't see when that's going to be possible.
You brought up an important point that I hope our viewers at least understand, is that, yes, in the short term this is bad for obviously Thailand, but the neighbors, there's this awkward benefit they get, because if you're not going to build a factory in Thailand, perhaps you might consider Indonesia. And I wanted to ask you, do you see it that way for the neighbors? Is it a zero-sum game for them?
Well, the neighbors, Thailand has really long been a pretty ideal place to work. They had a pretty open economy. It was easy for investors to get permission and then to set up. Indonesia is a huge market, and so companies are looking at Indonesia, but Indonesia is also much more protectionist and makes it much more difficult for foreign companies to invest. Some companies have been looking at Vietnam, but Vietnam and China have been in a bit of a spat since early May, because China put an oil rig in Vietnam's continental shelf, and as a result there have been huge protests in Vietnam. and where some factories have been trashed, and especially belonging to Chinese, Taiwanese, and others that use characters that Vietnamese viewed as somewhat similar to Chinese characters. And as a result, Vietnam isn't looking quite as bright right now either. So there's not terribly easy places to go. Malaysia is still pretty good. They're pretty stable. But a lot of the neighbors are really, not quite ready for prime time in all ways either.